Today I'm going to talk to you about using foils. I have these in rolls. I bought these some time ago. I was lucky I found this really great shop that's selling them off. And I've also ordered some from our usual spot for crafters, Art Van Gogh. You don't use an awful lot at once, so you can build up a stock as you go along of all the beautiful colours you can get. There's a lovely lime green, a beautiful pink, and recently I found some little rolls in a local craft shop. They're actually quite large, these, although not very wide. There's plenty of foil on them for many projects, so it's not an expensive thing to do, not by any manner of means. And I always save my little snippets, but I'll tell you about that later when I go on to show you some of the work I've been doing. First of all, if you're going to work with foils and any glue or Bonder web that you're going to use to stick the thing, I like to work on a board, and this is an old cake board. I've done the birthday cakes for the grandchildren, and now I'm using this old cake board, and I've put a little padding on it and then put a nice clean sheet of cotton or polycotton over it, and I've put I've stapled it on, but I put these wee pads on just in case I was stupid enough to put it on a polished surface. So that's what I work on top of, and you can do your small pieces of ironing on it. And if you're going to use Bonder web, and you know about Bonder web, that's the thing that comes in a long roll. It's gritty on one side and smooth on the other. I'll show you how to use that in a moment or two. And the other thing you're advised to use is baking parchment. No difference, both sides are the same on that. And it's good to keep your iron away from anything that's sticky or gluey. The other thing, and I'll just show you, if you do get any muckiness on your iron, I use this hot iron cleaner and a soft cloth, and it's wonderful for cleaning up your iron if you've been daft enough to get stickies on it. Now, I'll show you some of the things that I have been doing. I decided that one of the easiest ways to get the foil onto a piece of fabric, or in this case felt, is to actually cover the whole thing with Bonder web. You just take your piece of Bonder web and you hang on, I'll get a piece of felt to show you. I would take the piece of felt or fabric and I would just put the Bonder web on top, iron that in place, then peel off the backing, and then you have a sticky surface, and you can either cut out things or you can put a whole sheet of the foil onto it, as I've done here. It's actually an amazing, on that felt, it's a kind of amazing feel. It's almost like leather. It doesn't quite look like leather, but it has that kind of quality. Now, I don't think I would be using it in a great big piece like that. I would be chopping it up in some way, or I might even be stitching into it. There's a little sample. That's actually on a bit of fabric, but I was just testing out. It takes, the machine thread through it quite easily. It still is quite pliable, as you can see, but you could have a lot of fun with that. But one of the, as I say, the easiest ways to get your foil on is to use a whole sheet or a sheet that size of the Bonder web and just iron that onto your fabric, and then you can start putting your foil on. Now, at some point, you'll want to try and do some designs. Oh, here we go. There, I've got it here. You can see on this piece of fabric where I've actually cut the rectangle of Bonder web, and I've ironed that on first, and then I've cut my foil shapes and put them down on top. And of course, using my baking parchment on top, then I would iron, just an ordinary domestic iron, just iron over that to release the foil. Now, when you've got that done, leave it to cool for a minute or two, but then there's a clear backing on top of that, and you have to prise that off. It can be a bit fiddly, and you just pull that off, and you have that nice foil. on this piece, I cut squares of Bondaweb and ironed them into place. And then I cut triangles of the two different colours of foil so that I made this design. Now, I think that is a bit raw the way it is colour-wise, and I decided, as I've done before on a piece of work, I would put this very thin fabric over top. It's just one of these nylon organzas, very cheaply bought. In fact, I never like to use very expensive materials. What if it all goes wrong? And it sometimes does, believe me. I would be mad if I had wasted good material. So when I'm experimenting, I just like to use cheap materials. And that way I can, you know, it really buzz on with the experiments and not worry about the cost. So I think that is better looking that way. I might even consider putting another gauze fabric on top because I'm going to eventually work into this with lots of stitching and also perhaps cutting away some of the organza so that I am exposing the original brightness of the squares. Haven't decided yet. This is a work in progress. I never like to make up my mind how a thing is going to look until I get going on it, because you must be able to move sideways or, you know, turn it upside down if you feel inclined, if it, you know, if that's what's going to make it look better. So that's that piece that I'm working on. And this piece also was done by cutting the squares of Bondaweb, ironing them into place. And you can see that that is very, very bright. Something a wee bit Macintoshy about this at the moment. Colour and also he did use this square motif quite a bit. The gauze then I put on was that one, which is quite grey or lilac-y. And then I decided that I would try another on top, and I quite like that too. But that gives me options now, because I could go back to using the grey or going right back and using the bright foils if I start to cut into it once I've done some stitching on it. So these are two works in progress. Let me just show you this piece of work that I did a while back for one of our projects in our group. We were asked to do spring flowers or be inspired by spring flowers. Now there are little bits of foil. I don't know whether they're getting caught by the light. I'll just adjust this light and see if I can catch it any. Oh, it's not going to. Oh, there's a wee bit there. You see there are just little bits of foil. Now that wasn't easy to do because I had to cut tiny bits. Obviously I couldn't put down the whole piece of Bondaweb. I had to cut tiny bits out and then iron them on carefully. But it is possible then to enhance your design. You know, I was nearly finished this when I put this foil on. There's another wee bit that's sparkling there. But it just sparkled up these tulip heads for that particular piece of work. Now, I talked earlier about what do you do with your offcuts when you're working. Now, I've got a piece here. Again, I've used the Bondaweb right across that. And I think probably it'll look better if I give it a little bit of a frame. I'm going to put that on top so you don't see the grubby edges so much. But this was interesting because I've not only used the foil, but when I peeled back the foil, there's little bits of residue left over, and I decided that I would just go again and press them on, and that's how I got some of these textures here. I don't know what's going to happen to this, probably stitched into, but I quite like it the way it is, but I don't honestly think it's a finished piece of work yet. Now, I talked earlier about doing the organza over things, and there's an example of a bag that I made some time ago, and that was done on a purple velvet, a very strong purple velvet, and then I cut into the organza that I put over it, and a lot of machine sewing almost to look like braid across the top of it, and I was quite pleased with how that turned out. It was one of my earlier pieces, and then making cords, etc. I really like that wee bit of fuzziness that sticks out the edges. I think that's a wool yarn type thing. Can't remember, it's so long since I did that one. Now, another thing that you might think of is using, I've got two lots of glue here. They're sort of similar. One has a slightly bigger hole cut at the top, so you get a bigger bubble of glue coming out, and the other one is slightly smaller. But it was fun to do this. The only thing was I had to really concentrate, otherwise you don't get even-sized baubles of glue, and you have to leave the glue for a while to dry so that it'll take on the foil when you press it on. But if you don't want your bubbles to be squashed, then don't press too hard. But that really needs experimenting with. It's not an easy way of putting foil on. And there's a wee sample bit where my bubbles didn't, I didn't get it quite right. So I took a cocktail stick and pulled the glue out a bit. And it worked okay, but that's just a wee sample. I haven't gone any further with that idea as yet. Where else? You can use foil on card as well. That's the same screen printed design on there as that one, and just using the foil on top of the bubbles of glue. Not one to post, because we're limited in what we can post for a reasonable sum these days. It might make it too thick in your envelope. But also done little jewellery pieces, and that was fun to do. It's very small scale. I bought these commercially, and the silver chains as well, but it was fun just to do a little design in here. I've done some with more embroidery on, but these are very nice beads that I've sewn into place. Okay, I'm going to show you another technique here. I've got a piece of fabric, this is just for a sample, so it's just a small piece of fabric. I've got a piece of Bondaweb, with the rough side down onto the fabric, and I'll iron that on. But the other thing I have is this very fine web-like material. It's called Fusex. You can buy it in black, you can buy it in white, it doesn't really matter. But the colour for this technique this time, because we're going to put the gold over the top of it. Let me just work out where I'll put this. And about there will do nicely. Now, I've got my baking parchment here because I'm going to do this with an iron. Now, this is interesting because this is a foil that is silver, but then that means it's silver on both sides. But the shinier side is the one that I will have up towards me. And I'm placing that just over that fine Fusex web. And my baking parchment goes right on top. And I'm going to take my iron, which is a sort of medium heat, not too hot, not too cold. And I'm just going to press down and iron. That should be the Bondaweb adhered to the fabric. And now for the side, I'm going to go a little more lightly on this side. If you find that it's not stuck properly, you can use your iron again. Let's see how that is now. You can usually tell by looking at it whether it's taken. No, I don't think it's there yet. Let's do some more. Maybe I've let my iron cool down a little, but the temperature, if you're doing a lot of this all at once, your iron gets to a temperature where you know it's going to work. I've just not long switched this one on, so maybe that's what is the matter. I'll have a look this side and see what's going on. I think that is, yeah, I can see it's taken onto the fabric there, just on that corner you can see. Let's have a look at the other side and see what we've got. Yes, I've got that as well. So we can take the baking parchment off. And I'm going to take this off here. And that's totally covered in Bondaweb, that side. And this side, I'm going to I'm going to rip it off like a plaster. Right, whoa! That's nice, isn't it? If you feel that some of it is, you know, a bit proud of the sticky bit, I take a hogshair brush and I just rub it a little, and you can see some of the silvery is coming off, and that means you've got this lovely web there. And I'll give it a shake to get rid of the excess. I think I probably need to work a little harder with my brush to get that away. Now what I'm going to do is take this and put it on the other side, and we should get another image. And that means there's no waste. You've got 2 lots of this lacy silver fabric to work with. I don't know what you're going to do with it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's fun to do. Let's see how that has worked. I'll test out and see if it's come off, and I think it has. Right, I'm going to just gently, maybe I should just try it. It's not very easy to rip it off like a plaster. The fabric isn't. Oh, that golly, that's stuck well, hasn't it? Heavens, that's quite something. Still, it's coming off. Here we go. And I think I'll just lay this flat again, smooth it out, and put my baking parchment over and just iron on top of that, very lightly. I don't think you want to over iron any of your foiling, because you might lose the shine on it. And there we've got 2 bits of fabric. The fabric is still quite pliable with that foil on, but what I might do is, because I'm a great advocate of a soldering iron, I might cut shapes out of that. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's a sample of another way of putting foil onto fabric.